Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to this week's eLearning Career Chat. We took a couple weeks off as I was preparing a new schedule for the fall, but we have a huge lineup between now and I think the end of October. And then I'm taking November and December off because I am really tired. But thank you all so much for coming to today's session. If you've never joined one of our eLearning Career Chats before, the session is intentionally designed to be informal. I don't have any planned questions or content for Roberta. We're just going to have a conversation about her career. And about halfway through, we'll start tackling your questions. So as Roberta and I are chatting, you'll notice in the above the chat panel, there is a little questions pod. And you can go there and submit your questions and upvote on other people's questions. And about halfway through, we will start tackling those. So today we're talking about following your passions in L&D, in e-learning, instructional design, in learning, whatever you want to call it. So welcome, Roberta. How are you?
Thank you. Doing well. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, it is Wednesday. This week is flying by for me.
It is.
So, Roberta, we've known each other, gosh, I want to say maybe 2, 3 years. No, it's been more than 2 years because you interviewed when I was still working at GoDaddy. I remember that's how I met you through
Yeah.
a colleague. So we've known each other for a few years now when we met in
Yeah, maybe
person.
4. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell everybody a little bit about what it is that you do and what you're currently working on.
Yeah. I'm the VP of user research at a company called User Interviews. It's a recruitment platform that allows companies to connect with potential customers and get feedback about products and designs that they're working on. So I really fell into user research from instructional design. When you think about things like need assessments or
Mhm.
evaluation, that's really what user research is. It's connecting with customers, learners, and figuring out what do they need and how do we deliver what we're creating for them better. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You've had a really interesting career path, even since when I first met you years ago when you were interviewing for an instructional design job on my team. So can you walk us through like what your career has been like and moving from instructional design into user
Yeah,
research and user experience design and all of that?
for sure. Yeah, definitely a winding journey. I actually like to talk about my career. It started when I was in undergrad 10 years ago. I took an instructional design class and also taught first year students study skills on like how to adapt to being in university, and just got really fascinated with like the impact that technology could have on education.
Mhm.
Um, First role out of school, I went into a customer education role at a startup, teaching people how to use the platform that I worked for and the product. So I did things like webinars and help articles, performance support on how to learn this tool. And over the years, I actually transitioned into user experience just from like a mentor. My manager asked me if I wanted to move into it. I had really no idea what it was at the time. And I ended up building this learning experience design role where I could combine my instructional design and like customer education background as
Mhm.
well as user experience. So I was designing things like onboarding tours and stuff like that. Um, and then I did that for a while and actually moved into product management. So I did a lot of like strategy work, which was really exciting, and decided that my favorite part of like design and product was really connecting with customers, with learners themselves, identifying what are their pain points, their problems, how can we make these experiences better. What's been really unique about my career journey is that the product, I talk a lot about like learning products and learning services because I was always creating training or learning in the form of a product or service that was being
Mm.
sold. So rather than I've never worked on like an HR team before, or anything like that. And so I'm very different from other L&Ders in that respect. Um, and then at the same time of all of this like career movement, I also went to Boise State for my master's in organizational performance. And I've always been just hyper focused on like strategic, where does learning fit inside of an organization? what's the impact that learning can have on the business when it's being sold as a product or service. So it's definitely been like a winding journey over the years. Yeah.
So how do you, and maybe you're still trying to figure this out, but now
Mm,
you're the VP of user research, you said?
yes, yes.
So how do you define yourself as a professional? Are you still a learning professional? Are you a learning experiences?
Mm.
Like, how do you, or are you kind of in a career identity crisis trying to figure that out?
I'd say actually my career identity crisis, I hope is past tense.
Yeah.
It's happened all during that winding phases, but I consider myself a problem solver above all else.
Okay.
I do consider myself right now user researcher because I am in a like a public facing role now. But a lot of what I do as a user researcher, like I'm talking to customers, doing interviews, focus groups, whatever it might be. But then a lot of it is still like organizational development. Like, how do we centralize what we know about our customers inside of the
Hmm.
organization? What's the best way of working inside of the team that I'm on? So, and I also do a lot of training internally and externally around user research as well. So, it's kind of like a really awesome hybrid role of like UX and still learning design because I still use those skills every single day. So I feel
Right.
pretty lucky. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, whether you're an instructional designer or a learning experience designer or an e-learning designer, at the root and the core of what we do is we solve problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the the essence and the power of what we do is those skills can be applied in strategic ways regardless of what the role is, right? Doing a needs
Mm-hmm.
analysis, taking a data driven approach to recommending a solution, whether it's training or
Mm-hmm.
something else. Those skills apply in all sorts of different contexts. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's why I love my work so much. A lot of like people as instructional designers or L&Ders, the type of problems that you're solving are usually people problems in some ways. So it might be like,
Hmm.
how do we make the org more effective? How do we make people more effective in their roles? Um, and so I still do that all the time with my enablement materials, with training. And then a lot of it, I also am thinking about customers. How do we make our customers more effective? How do we meet their needs better? So I feel like I have the best of both worlds where my perspective is looking externally at our customers, but then also internally within the business too. So I feel
Yeah.
really lucky because I've never, I think you talk about this a lot too, is our career paths are so personalized and individual. And I've never met anyone with my path, which is like a
Hmm.
blessing and a curse. Because
Yeah.
I got to carve my own path, but then I got to carve my own path. So it was like,
Yeah.
all the uncertainties along the way and where I was going and figuring it out. It's been a journey for sure.
But that's special. I mean, that means you're
Yeah.
doing what really drives you rather than following some arbitrary thing that we're told we're supposed to do, right?
True.
I mean,
Very true.
for a long time, I thought nobody had my career path. I went from catching shoplifters into
Mm.
loss or into training and development. And it's funny, I've met probably I could count on one hand, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in the scheme of things, this is a lot. I've met several people who made that leap from loss prevention into training, oddly enough.
Mm.
So I thought my path was unique, but there are a few others out there. But that always excites me because then I get to talk, loss prevention, shoplifter catching skills with
Yeah.
these people. Um,
Amazing.
so I want to talk about. So we're talking a little bit about. I want to talk about following your passion in your career, but I think there's a lot of things that have to be addressed before you can figure out what passions or what that passion is that you want to follow. Having a career identity crisis, and then also I've talked about this before, and I want to kind of talk about it today as well. Is these I call them moments of evolution through your career, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But before
Mm.
I do, real quickly, for those of you who may have just joined us, feel free to use the questions tab if you have any questions for Roberta or myself about anything, and then we'll tackle those in about halfway through. If you put them in chat, that's fine. We just may miss them. So putting them in the questions pod, you can upvote on others. So I so Can you tell me about you said I mentioned career identity crisis earlier, and you said you hope that's past tense, but can you I don't know, can you talk about the moment for you when when you could articulate the "Oh shit" moment, "I'm maybe going down a path that's different than what I thought, and what does that mean for me long term?" I don't have you had that? 'Cause I had that early in my career, and it
Mm.
stressed me out. It was something that kept me up at night. I'm curious if you went through that, how you dealt with that.
I don't know if you noticed, but I took a deep breath as soon as you said, "Can you explain that?" I was like, "Okay." Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was a learning experience designer for about 2 years. And then I had talked to a fellow, just someone I knew in the industry, and they're like, you should move into product. And when they said that, I was like, like my instant gut was like, no, but I
Mhm.
went with it because that's what I thought would be next when you're in design.
Yep.
Product is something you move into. Um, and so I had signed on for a full-time product role. And a week before starting, I was leaving my house and fell down the stairs and broke my ankle.
Oh, wow.
And that was like you talk about wake up calls, that was like a universal wake up call.
Mhm.
And looking back, it was like I wasn't present because of my anxiety. I knew it wasn't the right role for me at all. I was forcing myself to fit into that new role. I was thinking about getting started. At the time, I was having panic attacks like at night before, like a week before starting too, because I was just like, oh, this is not right. Um, and I can like poke and make jokes about it now, but it's a real thing, like that gut instinct. If
Yep.
if I had listened to it, I would have known. Like I would have like it wouldn't have happened. But it was such a learning experience, and I stayed in that role for a year and a half. Um, and it was really rough, but it brought me back to what I love. Um, and my perspective changed so much during that period that I was in that role too. Um, and oftentimes I describe it as like, when you put on a pair of pants and it's like you're
Mm.
forcing yourself to put in the pants, like you might
Yeah.
have gained a little COVID weight and it's a little
Yeah.
tight. Um,
I had
that's
that
what
this past weekend.
that's what I felt like within when I was in that role. It was like I was shrinking myself
Ah,
into this pair of pants that I thought I was supposed to wear. And it's like, no, I can wear a pair of pants that like actually fits really great and it's like
yeah.
second skin. Which is where I feel like I am now. So
Okay.
yeah.
So moving into product was not where you were supposed to be going. That's what you realized from that experience, right?
No, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So for me, I guess I've had, if I could, I would say I had two really big career identity crises in my career. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my transition from catching shoplifters into instructional design, I was ignorant. I thought at the time that was going to advance my loss prevention career. And then I realized it was easy to make that transition because even though I was doing training, instructional design, I had that realization. It didn't freak me out because I
Mm-hmm.
was still working within a loss prevention team department with a bunch of other loss prevention people. But I remember when I had the opportunity to take on a training, instructional design, learning and development role outside of loss prevention. I remember having a little crisis. I call it a career identity crisis, where I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure, was I going to be good at training and instructional design and e-learning development on a topic that had nothing to do with loss prevention. Like, was my ability to create good
Yeah.
e-learning the result of me being my own subject matter expert, or was it because I was actually good
Mm-hmm.
at e-learning development? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I made that leap, and it was really scary at first, but
Mm-hmm.
it was really liberating to realize, oh no, I can be good at this. I don't need, in fact, I can be a better instructional designer and e-learning developer when I don't know a lot about the topic, because I can empathize
Mm-hmm.
more with my audience or my
Mm-hmm.
learners and then create better training as a result of it.
I
It's
can,
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say I can definitely relate to that most recently with my career move that I just made. Is I had done instructional design, like UX design, and then UX research, all for learning products. Like I worked at
Hmm.
Pluralsight, edX, Europe. it's all like talent development companies. And this was the first time in 10 years that I wasn't doing that. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I know what to do? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, yes, you know what to do. You've been doing it just in a different context. But it was probably another one of those like moments of like stepping into this new beginning for yourself, which was really exciting too. And I'm 4 weeks in now, and it's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's gone. Yeah.
Well, I think it speaks to, I've talked about this before. I don't remember the last time I talked about this. I think I posted a video about this or something, but I mentioned one of the things that I've learned to embrace. It took a lot of time to embrace this, but the more you push yourself outside your comfort zone, the more you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and the more
Mm-hmm.
you realize that, the things that used to freak you out or give you anxiety, they're always going to be there, but you learn to cope with them better, and you learn to
So
actually enjoy
true.
that growth, um,
Mm-hmm.
by being outside your comfort zone. And that's
So
really what I think
true.
a career identity crisis is. It's less about going, where am I going in my career, and it's more about, can I do this, and not fail at it, right?
Yeah.
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 So you mentioned that you fell down the stairs and broke your ankle when you were in the middle of
Mhm.
this career transition. It's so funny. I had a very similar uh, incident during my second career identity crisis. So after I
Mm.
after I left Kohl's, I worked for the state of Wisconsin doing e-learning, and it was a really long 13 months for me. But I remember at the time I didn't want to just work as an e-learning designer or an instructional designer at a company. I wanted to work in the
Mhm.
e-learning industry. And so I remember
Mm.
I applied for and got this job with Diane Elkins at Artisan E-Learning,
Yeah.
managing e-learning Uncovered. And I think it was my first week or my second week on the job, I was in my kitchen and I was wearing socks, and I slipped and fell, and I landed on my back on the tile, and I shattered my shoulder blade.
Oh
Uh,
no.
on my left, I think it was my left hand. I can't remember. I can't remember which shoulder blade it was now, but no, it was my right shoulder blade, because I was thankful that I could write, because I'm left-handed. And the funny thing about when you shatter a shoulder blade, they can't put a cast on it, because
Mm-mm.
it's so covered by muscle, it wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so you just have to wait the 6 weeks for it to heal. And during those 6 weeks, I couldn't lift my arm. Like, it was like a dead arm. I couldn't lift it above my
Yeah.
elbow. I couldn't sleep at night because I couldn't sleep on my back. I couldn't sleep on my side. I couldn't
Mhm.
sleep on my stomach. It was excruciating pain. I used my right hand as for my mouse cursor, so that was hard. And then, all while doing this, trying to transition from having a corporate job where you're one of thousands of employees, to being employee number 7 at a small company, doing something totally different. And so I remember one day I called up Diane, and like I burst into tears. I'm like, I can't do this. This is just not working for me. And I was so ready to quit. And it had nothing to do with her or nothing to do with the job.
Mhm.
It was the stress of the physical thing that happened, of course, and then
Yeah.
also realizing I was outside my comfort zone. And not only was I
Mhm.
like psychologically uncomfortable, I was physically
Yeah.
uncomfortable because of the shoulder blade thing. But I'm curious to hear, the reason why I tell that story is because one of the
Yeah.
things I'm curious to hear from you, as you've been through that winding pathway of your career. How have you, or maybe you haven't yet, have you managed to embrace those moments of being uncomfortable? And if so, like, how do you
Mhm.
cope with that, and get out of your own head that, the
Mm.
world's not going to come crashing and burning down? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I am a very deep mindfulness practitioner,
Yes.
so I'm actually finishing up like my mindfulness teacher training as well, and that's been one thing that grounds me. I'm much more grounded now than I was before. Um, and listening to that intuition, like your just bodily
Yep.
feedback that you have within your, like, I realize it's in my gut. I feel stress in my chest and my shoulders. Um, and providing space for myself. So like if I'm on a call and meetings, like we're often back to back to back, I actually set time in between meetings to like reflect and be like, how did that go? What was the impact? How am I feeling? How
Mhm.
do I feel like it resonated with my team? And all of those things help me. I do a lot of journaling personally too. Like I have an awesome team that I say I have. Like I have an executive coach, I have a therapist, I have mindfulness teachers. These are all like my team that I
Yep.
surround myself with that makes me feel like I can go anywhere. If I have
Yep.
the right people on my team, then I can do anything in the world. And oftentimes it's, I didn't realize how much my own unconscious thinking was limiting, like that was the limiting belief for myself. And so I've just done a lot of like personal work over the years to understand that more. Um, yeah.
I totally get that. I think if you get really quiet enough
Hmm.
and give yourself enough time, even if it's just 10 minutes, your body
Yeah.
will tell you everything you need to know
Hmm.
about
Yeah.
what's going on. And the hardest part is listening to that and then going, "Oh, that's I'm feeling this way and it's coming out in these really weird ways." You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I when I get outside my comfort zone and then this will lead to us eventually talking about following your passions. But I think people go through this when you're trying to follow your passions. The thing I have to tell myself when I'm feeling that way is it's all temporary. You know,
Hmm.
Every time I've been unhappy in a job, I realize it's temporary, and I have the power to control how long this is going to last. And when I don't feel like I've stopped when I feel like I've stopped learning from it or stopped gaining from it or stopped growing from it, I can choose
Hmm.
to make it end and go start applying for jobs. It's the thing that I find so disheartening. The thing that I find most disheartening is when people stay in positions, jobs, or parts of their life that they could change and they
Hmm.
choose not to. And I
Yeah.
find that such a waste.
Yeah.
And I realize people have circumstances and bills to pay, and that always plays into it. But you have the ability to change it. You just got to
Yeah.
recognize that within yourself.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of self-awareness
Oh
to
yeah.
recognize that. And then also, not judgment, like not holding judgment for yourself of like, as you're going through these experiences, whether it's like your daily job and you're kind of diving deeper into where do I want to go? What's the path? And you have that
Hmm.
fear come up,
Yep.
not repressing it, because often we try to repress it, but like sitting with it and be like, all right, I'm scared right now. Why am I scared? Like, why am I nervous
Hmm.
about this? And then
Yep.
flipping it to be like, what would make me less like scared? What would make me feel more prepared? And that's
Right.
like the action that you're talking about of how to change the situation.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you can when you're having that. Oftentimes, what you discover when you ask those questions to yourself is the answers are, "Oh yeah, I'm making that up in my head." Right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than like, once you separate what are you telling yourself versus what's actually real, you get really objective about
Mm-hmm.
it, you realize that like 90% of that's just you being crazy or you in your own head, you know what I mean? Uh,
Your thoughts are not your truth. Like your thoughts are not
no.
truths. You're
No.
with your thoughts every single day. And so
Yeah.
it can be hard to realize that. But when
And I
you
think
do, it's like, whoa.
And I think right now, I think it's been even harder for people, especially people who've been working remote and stuck at home.
Yeah.
I think for me, the two times in my career when I started working at Artists and eLearning with Diane, that was the first time I started working from home full time by myself. That was hard.
Hmm.
Everyone thinks it's really easy to transition to working from home full time, but it's not. And then with the pandemic, when I started my own business and left GoDaddy, again, being completely isolated, it
Yeah.
it's easier to like let your thoughts drive your behaviors
Yeah.
when you don't have people to talk to. And so to your point earlier, I saw this really great post. I used to work with at GoDaddy a woman named Katie Van Horn, and she now she owns her own company on diversity and inclusion, and she posted a really great post asking people, do you have a board of directors for your company? You also need your own board of directors for your professional self and your personal self. And that's what you're talking about, like
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
team of advisors that you can turn to and be vulnerable with, and you can trust them to give you objective feedback, right?
Yeah, it's your inner circle for sure.
Yeah.
And your inner circle might be different than who you think it should be. So, like,
Yeah.
normally in the past, I'd be like, oh, my inner circle is going to be my manager. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And as you explore, it might not be your manager. It might be someone else. You might find a mentor in an unexpected place that has nothing to do with your full-time job, but you like their leadership style or you like the way that they carry themselves. And then they're in your circle. And so it's one of my mentors actually used to say, like, build an island of greatness. And
Mm,
so I try to do that with the people that I surround myself with, is like, what's my island of misfit toys? Like,
yeah.
that, like, who's on my island with me? And they should make you feel like you can do anything. That's what your circle should be. It shouldn't be, when you talk to them, they shouldn't be energy draining. They shouldn't be the people
No.
that complain all the time. They should be like your hype people that are like, yeah, yeah, you got it,
Yeah.
to get you where you want to go. So,
Yeah, it's your cheerleaders. But I also think
yeah.
to that point, I also think it's important. One of the things I've been thinking about lately with mentorship is that the people that you turn to advise you or be your cheerleader or give you
Mm-hmm.
advice sometimes has to be the people who give you the harsh truth
Oh, for
and aren't
sure.
just an
Yeah.
echo chamber. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that can be hard to find because it requires you to be vulnerable and somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
willing to be honest with you. But yeah. Okay, so let's pivot real quickly before we tackle some of the questions that are coming in the questions pod. I want to talk about, we talked about career change and following your passions, and I think a lot of times people go through all of those things that we just talked about before you realize where you want to go in your career and what's really important
Mm-hmm.
to you in your career. I think a lot of times people sit idly waiting for whatever their passion is to like hit them in the face. And my response is, you're
Mm-hmm.
not just going to wake up one day and realize, what your passions are. You got to do a lot of shit and realize what you don't like before you realize what you do like. And so I'm curious to know, like, how have you actively worked? You've talked a little bit about like your passion being, using data to drive performance or mindfulness and sharing your knowledge. Like, how have you actively worked to keep those things a part of what you do through that career journey,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense?
Yeah, integrating those aspects into my career path. I was really lucky at the beginning of my career. I was at a company called the Predictive Index for 3.5 years, and talent agency, talent company. And my boss at the time had his PhD in positive psychology and gave me mentorship and coaching for like literally 3.5 years.
Mm,
And so that's like one way, and just self-awareness through that. I've done a lot of mindful leadership as well, like training and trying to integrate that approach into just how I operate on a daily basis. My mindfulness impacts everything from how I operate and show up just in life to holding space for customers or employees in conversations, for their like lived experiences, because that's really like, when we're in people experience or user experience, it's all about holding space for people's lived experiences. And so a lot of my mindfulness practice is just like echoing back what you're hearing, like utilizing active listening.
hmm
I do a lot of like journaling and writing and synthesizing. I'm pretty strict on my own calendar too, where I like provide space for myself in the morning to like be heads down and have deep work, and then I like pop up like a meerkat in the afternoon for my
Yeah.
meetings. And like not only holding space for others, but holding space for myself, because when you're in people experience and UX too, I was actually talking to the head of HR at my team. We're always holding space for other people, but how do we hold space for ourselves? And
Mm,
so thinking about things like on the weekends or like work-life balance, like I close my computer at a certain time because it's just like there's always going to be more work to do, always.
yeah.
So like, let's close it now and be present when you're just like present with people. So
Yeah, the best thing I've
Yeah,
learned to do is like I block my calendar. I'm very active
yeah,
at
yeah,
blocking my
yeah,
calendar. Even if it's I don't it's even if it's just heads down time or allows me to take extra time, I block my calendar. I'm very active with that. So I'm curious to know
yeah.
then, before we hopped on the call, you were talking about, where you're currently at. They've been big proponents of thought leadership and you actively engaging in the
Hmm.
industry outside
Yeah.
of what you do full time. Can you talk a little bit about, like, have you ever been in situations where that wasn't the case? And the reason why I ask this is I'm curious to know, when you got this job that you're currently at, did you have like hard lines drawn in the sand that I'm going to continue doing these things in my career and you can't stop me from that? Does that make
Mm.
any sense? Because I remember, because the reason why I say this is, my last time I had a full-time job, which was with GoDaddy. I talk about this a lot, but
Hmm.
in my during the interview process, one of the things I was very adamant about, and I've talked about this before, is I remember telling them, you know, I, I gladly take this job, but I speak at conferences, I blog, I'm active on
Mm.
LinkedIn, I do
Hmm.
freelancing during my nights and weekends, and I'm not going to stop doing those things for you. And
Yeah.
if you still hire me as a result of that, great. And if not, that's okay. I'm just not going to stop doing those things for you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has that been? Did you do that with your current job or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. For my current job, I had some pretty hard lines in the sand, based on previous experiences.
Hmm.
So last year I was in a role, and it was about, I want to say like 4 or 5 months into that role. I got approached with an opportunity to do adjunct classes with Boise State. It was with like my own master's program that I had been in a few years ago. And like something really meaningful, right? And
Which you're
I,
doing now, right? Is it you're currently
yes,
doing?
yes,
Okay, got it.
I
Yep.
split my time between my full time role right now, adjuncting, and then mindfulness teacher training as well.
Sure.
So yeah, so last year I got this offer, approached HR for the company that I was with at the time. And yeah, I was told hard no, like, absolutely not. You can't teach, you can't do any thought leadership in the industry, you can't blog post, you can't do anything.
Wow.
Um, which was a really difficult time for me because the companies that I had worked at have like are pretty big names in the learning space. And so if you're outwardly projecting like we're democratizing learning and access to
Yep.
education, that should mean you support your employees being teachers. And we all know this. We all know the benefits to teaching.
Hmm.
And so I made a really difficult decision. I decided to leave. I was lucky at the time that I had a relationship at another company, and I moved. I moved there for a few months, but I like just couldn't. I couldn't work there. I remember as it was happening, I was just sobbing because I was like, I feel like I'm having to choose between my two passions in life, which is like research for a learning product and then teaching, which is like when you're a teacher, when you're an educator, it's who you are. You cannot turn it off. It's
Yep.
something you carry into every interaction. And I felt like if I couldn't do that but stayed in my role, it would be repressing a piece of myself.
Hmm.
And it was really hard decision to make, and it actually ended up impacting myself and my self narrative, like we were talking about. When I left, I was like, is this a horrible decision? I gave up this amazing job I love. um, who am I? Do I have the right to teach? Like, what do I have the like what do I have to share with the world? Why am I
Yep.
so important? um, and I worked through that, like really worked through that over the past few months, and now I'm sharing again. But
Well,
it
good
was a
for
traumatic
you.
experience. Yeah.
Well, the thing, we talked about this last year when that happened. I, I'm not taking credit for this because you were the one who
You
did it. I think
did.
I told you, I'm like, you need to quit.
Yeah.
You need to dump that.
You did. You did. Yeah, and it was like when we talk about gut feelings, like
Yeah.
I knew what I needed to do, and it was so uncomfortable because my biggest fear at the time was like leaving without a backup plan, without a way of
Yeah.
like knowing how I'd pay the bills. And it happened. I lived through it. It's a lived experience, but having like that time, you were someone who was on my team in my inner circle and being like, that's messed up. Like
Hmm.
this is not normal. Um, and it's important that we do that and check with people, because workplaces are so different these days. Like
Yeah.
everyone's experience is so unique. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what's so wrong with that, what happened in that situation, is that the things that you were doing that probably contributed to you getting hired in the first place,
Yeah,
being a thought
exactly.
leader, participating in the community, those things are the things that probably helped get you hired. And then to tell you you can't do them anymore, then you're stifling that person. Uh, it's just it's excuse my language, anybody. I curse a lot sometimes. That's bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
can't. That's
Yeah.
bullshit. You can't do that to people.
Yeah.
The thing, and the other thing about that too. This is something I learned early in my career. Is oftentimes, and this comes out in many different ways. For me, it came out. What I'm about to say came out when I was leaving Kohl's department stores. Everything I learned about instructional design and e-learning, I learned at Kohl's, because that's where I became an instructional
Mhm.
designer. And for
Mhm.
me, when I left Kohl's, I had this like horrible guilt, because I thought they had some proprietary ownership over my expertise, because that's
Mm,
where I had gained it. And it wasn't
yeah.
until I left that environment, and I had a great time there, and it wasn't a negative environment. But once I left the company, I realized, oh, they don't own how I've grown. I still own it, and I can use it in many different ways. And so I think it's easy for people at companies who get really possessive over their employees' time, or what
Mhm.
somebody has to offer, to feel like that company has some proprietary ownership over what it is that you
Yeah.
can do. And that's okay. I mean, some companies are like that, I think, but usually when companies are like that, it's it the offset is you get paid really, really well. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
but when you're just an everyday employee, or even if you're just a mid-level person, stifling people that way is just, I don't know. It it makes no sense
yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I'm on we're on the same page. I just we are multifaceted human beings, right? And
Hmm.
so it's not like I can turn that part of me off when I'm working, especially now, like remote work, like I am who I am.
Yep.
And so it's nice when you get to an environment and your employees, like your employer, supports it, because they recognize. I mean, I feel like individually most of us recognize, but for some reason in some organizations, when you get there, they're like, no, your job is your job and I don't want
Yep.
anything else. But my the time I spend in my garden on the weekends relaxing impacts how I show up on Monday and how relaxed
Yeah.
I am and what I do on Tuesday. Um, and I think it's beneficial as society that we recognize that, um, and support it and support our
Hmm.
employees. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the time I spend when I was working full time, the time I'd spend speaking at a conference, or writing a blog post, or
Mm-hmm.
mentoring somebody, or doing freelance work, it made me a better instructional designer. It made me a better
Exactly.
person. It made me more fulfilled in what I was doing. And
Mm-hmm.
to tell people, it, what do you want me, like, I'm just supposed to go home and read a book and twiddle my thumbs until 9 o'clock runs around the next day to serve you? Like, it's just it's such outdated thinking, in my opinion. And I think,
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted your thoughts on, and then we'll start tackling questions, is that um I gave somebody this advice the other day, and it was kind of an epiphany for me. Is that I think a lot of times people tie their success to a particular position, or a particular team, or a particular manager, or a
Mm-hmm.
particular job, or a particular company. And the advice I gave this person, I was like, stop tying your success or your future to this position or company. Tie
Mm-hmm.
it to your experiences and what you're doing to grow, because I guarantee you the company is not tying their success to you, you know?
No.
And
No.
so, for me, the thing that I've learned is every job experience, every client I work for, everything that I do, of course, I'm asking myself, like, what can I give to this company, this client, this experience? But it's
Mhm.
equally as important to ask yourself, well, what am I going to get from this experience? And I think so often
Mhm.
that balance is out of balance. We give all of ourselves to a company or position or team or manager without asking ourselves, like, what are we gaining from it? And if you're not gaining anything from it, even if it's just a paycheck or more, then maybe it's not worth your time.
Yeah, I had a hard reflection on that when I decided to leave that job last year. And like my partner and I bought a different house. Like we moved to a different location because I was like all in for this job. And
Mm,
I think it was a wake up point for me too, to be like, I'm investing so much of my time for this company and they're not giving it back to me. F that, I'm giving it back to me
yeah,
now. And so I've like
right.
recentered myself. And the reality your time will usually, you won't nowadays usually stay at one company for your entirety of your career. If you
Nope.
do and you have the career growth there, absolutely amazing. Like I'm all for it, but
It's probably
very
not going to
rare.
happen that way.
Yeah, very rare that it happens. And so like every single company that you go to, you will have a manager.
Yeah.
But what is the same thing in every single role that you're in? It's you.
Yeah.
That's the common factor. And so carrying that with you, your intentions of what you're looking for, where you're looking to go, you are the best advocate for yourself. Nobody else, not your manager. So how are you surfacing that to others? What are the intentions that you set? Um, and at the end of the day, like you will hopefully take the perspective back and be able to see the linkages between your entire career because you set those intentions. You had that career growth and that progression in mind along the way. um, it's really beautiful. I did not go into my career thinking that I would be like a VP of user research or whatever it was. I thought I would be an instructional designer. I just wanted to help people.
Hmm.
Um, and looking back now after 10 years and seeing the common thread, it's like, oh, I guess there was a purpose. There was something all along
Yep.
in all of those like career identity crises that guided me in this direction.
I know. It's so true. It
Yeah.
sounds so for people for those of you watching who are in the midst of figuring out what the heck you're doing and you're in a like
Yeah.
you're in a career transition or you're trying to get a job or you're working for a bad boss, like I know what we're sounds so like Oprah magazine woo woo crazy, but it's true. Like as long as you like, you have to have a north star for your career, and every decision you make, whether you take a job or quit a job or take on an experience, like it has to move you forward towards that. And it really is like it really is very fulfilling and beautiful and satisfying when you can look back and see how all of those pieces fit into place. And you may not
Mm-hmm.
know that direction you're headed, but hindsight's 2020, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I know that
Mm-hmm.
sounds woo woo, but it's true. So
I'm all
uh,
for the woo
yeah, that's fine.
woo.
Okay, good. Well, let's tackle some questions. We have some questions in the questions pod. So let me go to the top. Kathleen, hey Kathleen. Kathleen has the most votes. Kathleen wants to know, how do you navigate the overwhelm, like the overwhelming feeling?
Mm,
There's so much to learn, master in our field, and it just seems impossible to find a niche, let alone build proficiency within it. That's a great question. I think, Kathleen, so many people are facing that. People like former teachers trying to get into our industry, I
mhm,
think, are facing that because our industry is really multifaceted, and there's a lot of different
mhm.
directions you can go, and they feel like they have to learn everything. I know I felt that early in my career. I don't know, Roberta, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely felt that in my career as well. I try to I do a lot of like self-reflection where I ask myself questions of just like, what am I hoping to learn? Or sometimes I'll even say like, what energizes me? And I'll
Yep.
keep a note like when I'm in meetings, like, did this meeting de-energize me in some way? And like really broad questions to help guide me. And then it really starts to guide like, oh, I get excited when I'm developing e-learning videos. Maybe I should explore some more in that tool set. Or like, I hate presenting at 70-person meetings. Well, I'm not going to be the CEO anytime soon. So let me cross that off my list. And so a lot of my career path has been like asking those self-reflective questions of like just what energizes, what depletes me, to narrow my focus of specific skills that I want to learn. Um, I did also try to focus on growing like generalist skills in instructional design. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you work with stakeholders? How do you like identify a performance problem and then determine the best solution for that?
Yep.
And as I checked like, oh, this energizes me, de-energizes me, then I got narrower and did some specializations like performance support, e-learning, stuff like that. And so that helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Finish your thought.
That helped to just cut some of the overwhelm for me too,
Yeah.
where it was just like, it's just focusing. And one thing I try to do is like, it should be a feeling of excitement when you're exploring, like embracing your curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have curiosity, letting it run wild can be overwhelming. And so how can you focus that in a specific way? The questions that you ask, and keeping track can like help it be energizing, but like also keeping it a little tight too while you're exploring.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The thing one of the things that I do, I totally agree with you. Like figure out what you enjoy doing, like what really wakes
Mm-hmm.
you up, what you could get lost in for hours and
Yeah.
focus in on those things. I think one of the things I learned early in my career, and I stay true to this day, is uh, a lot of times companies or during performance reviews, they put so much focus on like, what are your areas of opportunity? Let's really work on developing those. And I'm like, no, they're my areas of opportunity because they're always going to be my areas of opportunity. Maybe I don't enjoy doing that. And so don't focus
Mm-hmm.
on your weaknesses. You know, focus on the things that you enjoy doing, the things that you're good, and become better masters
Mm-hmm.
of those things. You know, for
Yeah.
example, I don't know anything about XAPI or JavaScript or coding.
Yeah, no thanks.
And I really have no freaking interest in learning that stuff. And so I'm
Yeah.
not going to invest my time doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this really great quote. I don't know who said it. And I'm not going to quote it properly, but it goes something along the lines of like, I would rather fail at something I love than be successful at something I hate any day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't know. Again, that sounds woo woo, but like just focus on those things that you really enjoy doing. You might have to do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things to figure out what that is, but keep track of
Mm-hmm.
those things and keep leaning to those things, and that'll at least push you in the right direction. So
Yeah. Yeah, for
okay,
sure.
good. Thank you, Kathleen. Jim, hey Jim. A lot of familiar faces today. Jim wants to know, what advice would you give someone who is still looking for their passions in e-learning but doesn't know where to start? I don't know. I think this goes back to the previous question, or the
Mm-hmm.
previous answer we gave and this is what I would say to those people, is just start doing it. Just start like immersing yourself in it and keeping track of what you like and don't like. And usually what will come out of that is at least some clearer understanding. Um, I don't know, Roberta, do you have anything else to add on that one?
Yeah, I definitely, when we talk about like those narratives in our head, oftentimes, especially when it comes to career, we can just cognitively invest a lot of time into thinking about doing something. And so
Mm-hmm.
I agree with the step of like, let me just go out and do it. Um, Seeing what interests you when it comes to learning. And it might be teaching a specific topic area that interests you. Like, oh, I want
Yeah.
to teach people how to garden. Let me explore making an e-learning video about gardening or something like that. But giving yourself like little projects or just curiously exploring, and doing it and reflecting on how it's going. I fully believe that you likely will not find all of your passions within your full-time job and that only.
No. Oh my
So,
God, no.
and you shouldn't. Like, is that healthy? I don't think so. So, exploring in your like outside day to day too, of seeing, like we just mentioned, what energizes you, what do you like teaching, what do you like learning about in your free time?
Mhm.
And all of those things filter into that too.
Yeah. Talking about the like just doing it and jumping into it. I over the years, as I've taught people about e-learning design, it always fascinates me when somebody's like, "Well, I've never done a prototype before, or I've never written a storyboard before." So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Well, let's start writing a storyboard. Just start
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
it." Like, there's a million things I've never done before, never built a website before, but today I'm going to start learning how to build a website and just do it. And don't be paralyzed with your or don't be paralyzed with the fear of the unknown. Like, just dive into it, and
Yeah.
a lot of stuff gets clear. So I don't know. I hope that helps, Jim. Okay, Robin Blair. Hey, Robin, or not Blair, Belair. Robin Belair wants to know, please describe a bit of your personal self-regulation strategies for managing your career and how your mindfulness training may influence impact. I'll let you kick that one off, Roberta.
Hi, Robin. I miss you. Yeah, I think for this, it's a lot of what I mentioned of like self-journaling, reflecting on things. In meetings, I do like 15-minute pauses sometimes in between meetings in terms of like just reflecting on like, was this energizing? Was this de-energizing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also will set intentions for myself every 6 months with my life, and one component of that is my career too. And so I look ahead and I'm like, where do I want to be 6 months from now? What are the type of behaviors that I have or the confidence that I have? And so that helps as like an internal check-in to like guide too. And it all comes to like self-awareness as well. All of the tactics that I mentioned are techniques that I use to just get better with my self-awareness and self-regulation. I have times when I'm like, oh my god, how did I get here? What am I doing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's normal too. So yeah.
That exists all the time. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that kind of imposter syndrome that's always going to be there. But I agree with you. Like, I love the intention, like setting yourself up intentions for 6 months rather than, like, I always
Mm-hmm.
hate the question of like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's like, hell if I know where
I
I
have
don't know.
no
I have no
idea.
idea, but 6 months I think is something that is,
Manageable.
manageable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And having an intention and a North Star of what you're trying to achieve. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So next question, Kelly Kelly wants to know a little bit more specific question on portfolios, but how do you recommend, or do you have any recommendations for building a portfolio or instruction for of instructional design work? Time for me to move from my current job and having a hard time figuring out how to showcase my work. Um, Broad question, but I mean, this is the answer I always give people, Kelly, and I'm curious to know your take on this one, Roberta.
Mm.
You and I haven't talked much about portfolios in the past. Your portfolio is a representation of three things, or it should be a representation of three things: what you really enjoy doing, what you're really good at, and what you want to be hired for.
Mm-hmm.
However, as long as the work somehow intersects with those three things, that's the stuff you should put on your portfolio. And so if you enjoy storyboarding, then showcase your storyboarding work. Or if you enjoy
Mm-hmm.
visual design with storyline, that's what I showcase in my portfolio. Or if you like video creation, put videos on your portfolio. I think the worst thing you can do is just put a lot of everything on your portfolio, because the hiring managers don't know what you specialize in.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that goes back to, you have to do a lot of things before you know what those things are. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Roberta, what are your thoughts on that?
We're pretty aligned on the same page.
Yeah.
I definitely, even the students I work with at Boise State too, they ask me questions about portfolios. And I recently worked with one student who put everything. They had like instructional design plans, customer education,
Oh,
e-learning, all these
wow.
different things, which is great. It shows that you have broad, like we talk about breadth versus depth. It shows the breadth, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a believer you can't be amazing and want to do everything all the time.
Yeah.
So if there's an area that you want to specialize in, or I try to put out into the world in terms of like the samples of work that I enjoy doing, that I want to do more of.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of my portfolio is like more strategic work because that's what I like doing right now.
Yep.
Um, and I will usually recheck like once a year at least to see like do these pieces still align with where I am right now? Do I need to
Right.
overhaul it? And I've done that many times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I want to know, when I look at someone's portfolio, I want to know what they're really, really good at. and having that, that T-shaped employee, the broad broad ability but deep expertise. I want to know what the deep expertise is. I can figure out your broad ability during the interview process. And I think people sometimes overcorrect when they're job searching, and then they put all of this stuff on their portfolio thinking it's going to make them more attractive to more people. And I don't think that's the case. And so even if all you create, I'm just using this as an example, you love storyline, right? Well, then create 1 or 2 really freaking amazing storyline courses and have that on your portfolio. I've said this before, like when I worked at Artists in eLearning as a company did over $1 million in revenue a year doing custom e-learning development. And for years, they had 1 example on their portfolio, just 1. And it was because showcase their best work of exactly what it is that they did. Now I think they have 2 examples, so they've progressed. And yeah, so it's just really focusing on those things that you're really good at. And maybe you don't know what that is, and that comes in time, but that's the other part of it. Is a portfolio is a breathing, living thing, and it evolves over time. The things that are on my portfolio now would have never been on my portfolio 10 years ago. It was very different. And so it evolves. So okay, I think we have time for one more question. We'll take on David's. David says, learning a lot here. A question around finding a best fit for my skills. Video editing, installing and designing content in LMS platforms, script writing, storyboarding. I'm a teacher and trainer, but I absolutely do not want to build a brand or be in front of the camera. I've considered working with professionals, from personal trainers to pet trainers to beauticians, to help them get online with their own online courses, using my equipment, web skills, recording studio. Would there be any way for me to validate this direction before investing too heavily? I mean, the thing I'll say about this, David, is if you're not wanting to be in front of the camera, that's okay. You don't have to be in front of the camera in order to build your brand. But you can't, one of the things I always tell people about freelancing or running a business is you can't freelance in secret. In order to get work, you have to have clients. In order to get clients, they have to know who you are. And in order for people to know who you are, you have to put yourself out there in some capacity. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. It was definitely uncomfortable for me. I as much as I work hard to be open and an extrovert, I am really an introvert at heart. And so this is, even what I'm doing right now, this is me getting outside my comfort zone. And I've had to do a lot of it in order to fake looking comfortable in front of an audience. And so ways for you to validate that before you invest too much. I don't know what the answer. I don't know what the answer is to that, because I think there's no, maybe if you have a full-time job, you can do it during your nights and weekends. That takes risk, but there's always going to be risk involved. I don't know, Roberta, I feel a little stumped on it, but
no, it's all good.
Yeah,
I think in terms of like validating career path, is there a specific like market you want to do freelancing in, or customer segment you want to do freelancing in? Doing things like Tim talked about during his transition, nights and weekends, start writing blog posts, look at the traffic, see who goes there, start talking to people in your network, like doing customer interviews or interviews with them about their pain points and challenges, and let that guide the strategy of where you are taking your freelancing business and where you're looking to go. And be a gut check, because you don't want to build a business plan based off of where you think it is without talking to potential customers. And then you've invested thousands of dollars and you're like, oh man, no one's going to buy this. So yeah, using things like surveys, one-on-one interviews, focus groups, promotions, like throw up a marketing website, see if people go to it. Is there interest? And if there's not, edit some copy, do some tests. It's all an experiment, really. So.
And I think it's important to remember, and I remind myself this every time I take a risk, is that it's temporary. If it doesn't work out, I can pivot to something else. And I think the other thing too is to find opportunities that you can test out whether or not this is something that's good for you, that doesn't involve you taking the deep plunge. And what I mean by that is, before I started writing my book, I wasn't sure whether or not I could write a book. So I thought, well, I don't want to invest a lot of time self-publishing a book. Well, let me write an ebook and give that out for free. And let me see if I can do, I mean, that's just a specific example. Like I'm taking an opportunity to create something that doesn't involve a lot of risk. Or like freelancing. I spent, 8 years freelancing during my nights and weekends while I worked full time to see if I could be a freelancer. And so at the end of the day, though, there is going to be a moment where you're on a precipice and you have to leap and you don't know whether it's going to work out or not. That there's no way to completely avoid that. That's going to happen, and you'll have to make that leap no matter how much you prepare for it. I think it's important to remember that as we talk about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Before we wrap up, a couple quick things. So I'm putting some links in chat. Feel free to join us inside the eLearning Designers community, continue the conversation, and you can check out our future sessions there as well. Roberta, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you online if they want to connect with you, chat with you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My website is robertalearns.com. It's also my handle on Twitter. I also have learnmindfully.co, which is my mindfulness offerings and workshops. So find me there on LinkedIn too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Roberta. And thank you all so much for coming and asking those awesome questions. And until next time, I'll see you all around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.